Now, in all honesty, it's an area of growing importance, especially as we move towards the probability of formal regulation of property agents in England. But it's a pretty piecemeal business. There's been lots of bits of legislation slotted in at different times to deal with perceived issues. Some of that legislation is then being sort of rendered obsolete or modified substantially by other bits of legislation. And it also covers a pretty wide range of stuff, both by way of statute, by regulations, with guidance sitting on top of that. So we've got a sort of a somewhat messy picture covering the sector. And then, of course, there's quite a wide variation between a state agency and lettings agency in terms of the mechanisms of regulation as well, because they have historically been treated quite differently by government, and generally to a large extent fall under different government departments as well. And indeed, part of the problem with all of this is that different bits of regulation are slotting in from different departments and in slightly different ways to create a sort of overall sort of constellation of control. Moving on to unfair terms. So the Consumer Rights Act picks up the old unfair terms and consumer contracts regulations, which is based on an EU directive, and just reenacts all that stuff. It is primarily an issue for lettings agents and primarily due to an issue with commission. So lettings agents, of course, don't just charge commission for finding someone in the way an estate agent does. They charge usually an ongoing commission for as long as the person they have found occupies the property and pays rent for it. And the rationale for that is if I find you a tenant who stays for 5 years, then I found you a particularly good tenant, and on the traditional position of commission, which is that an agent shares in their principal's profits, I should get some share for having found you such a great tenant that they stayed for years and years. This is went to court, ended up in the High Court, in fact, under the Office of Fair Trading, as it then was. It's now the Consumer Markets Agency, the CMA. The OFT took Foxton to court over this issue. It was held in that case that renewal commission on let-only arrangements, i.e. where the agent's not doing anything like managing the property or negotiating renewals or collecting rent, is unfair if it carries on forever. It basically has to expire after a short period of time.